Welcome to Politically Connected, a podcast on everything politics and governance in Kenya and Africa. We aim to awaken the civic consciousness of the continent. Today's episode, we're going to talk on something very interesting, especially in our African culture, called forced marriages. Or would I say forced political marriages. I'm your host, Diana Ngao,
Madam Speaker, and I am Chaka,
aka the Bishop.
Today's episode is brought to you by Broadway's Bread. Why? Because we are discussing Nusu Mkate.
Yeah, the broad-based government. By the way, if I was the marketing manager for Broadway's, I'd have really taken advantage of that.
Missed a moment.
Mase, Broadway's government.
It was right there.
We really want to unpack what is this broad-based government. Is it Nusu Mkate? You know, we've had so many instances in our political history where we've had different versions of what Kenyans synonymously know as Nusu Mkate. Or in today's Kenya, broad-based government. But even before we get there, I want to ask the Bishop. What is a Bible reference for today's conversation?
The prophet Isaiah, the book of the prophet Isaiah, there is a verse that says, "Come, let us reason together." And I think that's what dialogue is. Come, let us reason together.
It is what our favorite politician, hey.
Mtukutu. Ama mtukufu.
I'm even wondering how I went there. Mtukufu, like Rais, alisema, come let's dialogue. Tumewasikia.
Yeah. And there was talk of a multi-sectoral forum.
Yes.
Which was meant to bring different sections, cross-sections of society, the religious, civil society, the political class, and it was an effort to appease and quell the rising unrest.
Yeah, but really, was it to appease? Because I believe, and maybe we'll look into it, but I believe the reason of the unrest was really a call for good governance and accountability. And what would appease these people let me not say these people, us as Kenyans, what would appease us would be the change in tone, the change on how we govern, the focus on the critical issues that all the unrest was saying. So I want to define in terms of whether the broad-based government was really to appease and say that it is really more to suppress and just tell people, sawa, relax, tunaongea. You know, like the way when a child is told by the parents, well, relax, tunaongea, tutakwambia.
Yeah, I think part of it is really what we were discussing earlier, that it's a culture of responding to certain issues in the same way. We had talked about it in one of our earlier episodes about how this was a political solution that interrupted an economic revolution.
Yeah, and by the way, if you guys haven't caught it, that was on episode 2, so head back to episode 2 and watch as we discuss about different tactics the state uses to suppress revolutions.
And we were asking whether Kenyans are politically traumatized.
Yeah.
So it being a political solution that interrupted an economic revolution, or what I've seen elsewhere being referred to a revolution of rising expectations, is we say it's an interruption because there's a possibility that those same sentiments that took very many people to the streets have not been addressed.
Yeah, for sure.
The issues still remain.
Yeah, I actually think broad-based governments, Nusu, Mkate, dialogue, all these things are really tools for political preservation, where the political class feels like, okay, the people are rising against us, so we need to somehow preserve ourselves, and kind of locks them out of the conversation. And we've seen it with NADCO. We've seen it with now this broad-based government, and probably in the past, before this current regime came in, there have been very many instances. And true to what you're saying, I personally believe that by the end of this year, 2024, we'll be back on the streets. Yeah, because the issues are just getting more and more. And there's even a hashtag live right on X, reject the finance bill 2024 is back. And it was a rejected bill. So you can imagine we'll be back. It is like alamas are...
Yeah, and I do empathize a little bit. And the reason I empathize is because of the place and power of culture. And it's not always very easy to overturn a culture.
That's true.
And it's a culture of political inclusion. It's what we know. From the very beginning, we had been oppressed by a colonial government, and we didn't have a say in things. And we wanted to be included in self-government.
Yeah.
And so that was political inclusion. Even being taken all the way to Lancaster and the like. It was political inclusion.
Lancaster, yani before independence.
Yeah, because our wakoloni ndo walikuwa kusema hiyo time. So they were including us. It's unsettling because I mean, you shouldn't even be included in
your own governance.
In your own governance, but it's part of what, you know. It didn't seem obvious now when it pains us looking back, but even now, it feels painful that we're having to struggle to be included in the issues of our time.
Yeah, that's true. But even before we get into the Nusu Mkates that we've had in our political history, let's just talk a little bit on now of ODM principles joining Kenya Kwanza. What does it do to the checks and balances of a government? Because for there to be a ruling party, there is an opposition party. ODM is the opposition party, or rather Azimio, which is majority ODM, is the Azimio party. But so what happens now that they have, or rather their principles, let me say, you know, it's things of technicalities, and I feel like that is where the government is beating the public at in terms of accountability. It's like a charade that is being done, that we're trying to be accountable, but really we're not. In terms of how is it, what would accountability look like when principles of the opposition are now sitting in the executive?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does stifle checks and balances, because on the one hand, there is this suggestion that, you know, not only is there still an opposition, but the same political party that has sent 4 high-ranking officials to cabinet insists it's still very much in the opposition, and they say it with a straight face.
And you know, it's crazy because the Kenya Kwanza campaign was the bottom-up campaign. And then these principles of the Azimio, or rather ODM, were the biggest detractors of saying that, you know, remember there's a video of Wycliffe Oparanya telling people just last year, Musilipe your hustler fund. And I don't know whether it's the stars aligning and how now he's the one in that ministry trying to get up all the hustlers, please pay back your loans. Right?
Na kule kwangu wamesema hiyo pesa ya hazula wakipata watalipa. Hapa mtafanya nini? Mtafanya nini? Hamulipi?
Nina hakika nikipewa nafasi nitalainisha mambo ya hustler fund.
It's interesting.
It's just I'm just trying to understand, and I'm sure so many Kenyans are trying to understand. Really, this political solution of broad-based government, what does this look at for what we are asking for, which is really just accountability and good and good governance? Does it really promote it, or is it just clawing back? Is it more of just more of the political preservation we were talking about? Yeah.
You know, there are certain risks that come with, I mean, looking at things in absolute terms, especially when we are passionate about certain things, and we want to see it through the lens of what we were agitating for. And for us, what was central was, socio-economic rights, and the advancement and an environment that can allow people to live dignified lives. On the other hand, actually including members of opposition in cabinet is a politically hard thing to do, but it does then say that this is a Kenyan government. It's not a UDA government. It's a government of all Kenyans. So
of national unity.
Of national unity.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because, like we've said before, some of these very profound ideas have become, dirty words. Because government of national unity should be a good thing.
Yeah, and it should inspire confidence. Yes. Yeah, it should.
But there's a question of timing. You may
I'd say timing and intention.
Yeah, because you may be, arguably, even if you're doing the right thing, are you doing it at the right time? Is that the issue to be addressed on the table?
Yeah.
Some of the best governments have been, Lincoln's government, a team of rivals. We saw one of the reasons we celebrate Kibaki as one of the best presidents so far. A lot of the things he achieved under this government of national unity.
Yeah.
But the question still remains, okay, you have this level of political inclusion now. You have these people who, because these are very, much as yes, they were high-ranking of opposition leaders, they are also very respected Kenyans in their own right.
Yeah, in their communities.
So what Governor Oparanya was able to achieve in Kakamega, Ali Hassan Joho, having been in Mombasa, he understands issues of blue economy and natural resources, which now extends to mining. You have someone who was the chair of ODM, which is a very vibrant party. And
by the ODM, I think is one of the largest political parties in Africa.
Yes. Yeah. So being the chair of that and steering that ship and being entrusted in that role by somebody like Baba, and then you also have Opio Andai, who
leader of minority.
Leader of minority, very well respected. Asking tough questions. So in a sense, you would hope that they would bring this the zeal they had in opposition into cabinet. You would hope, but at the same time, there's the anxiety that being in power now tames the lenses through which you see the issues that are important to people.
I mean, for me, I'm seeing it also in terms of, because they were high-ranking officials in their party, that now they have resigned because of their executive role. However, how does let's say I was a member of ODM, and I'm now in parliament, and I'm meant to check the executive, how will I be able to check this person?
Yes.
That's what I'm asking. I'm like, okay, fine, we have this broad-based government. Whatever political solution it was solving, it has solved it, sour. But then what happens? Is it clawing back in terms of the good governance and the structures that are enshrined in our constitution? Is it bastardizing what really the Gen Zs and the millennials have been pushing for?
It is.
Because, I mean, what next? Actually, by the way, Bishop, I think in a playbook, and I feel like you have alluded to this before, in terms of when, I don't want to call it a sore loser, but when you've lost in the elections, unatingiza kitu, hadi unasema wanakuinvite, please don't disturb us anymore. Come sit, kunywa chai. You know, here's a red carpet, fly all over the world.
Well, one thing I would want to speak to that you've just said is, are they bastardizing issues that were important to Gen Zs and millennials? In a sense, they are, and that's why, question. Yes, you may arguably have done the right thing, but was it at the right time? Why do I say that? See, part of the conversation here is, okay, yes, you've joined government, and there's progress you may be able to bring, and ideas or different perspective, and you have custody of certain interests of the people, but then let's be honest. If you genuinely value the principles of checks and balances, the principles of accountability, the principles of a democratic society where those in power are held to account, then having joined this government, relinquish your hold of insisting that you're still leading opposition.
Exactly. I
because
feel like
it's almost like you're saying you're the only one that can hold government accountable. That those principles don't exist outside of yourself.
it is like having your cake and eat it.
It
That
really
I am
is,
in government, but don't worry, I can check myself.
Exactly. And that's where now the dishonesty checks in, and why it makes the conversation difficult.
Yeah.
If we're being honest that you want to advance this interest and you're doing it right, then you shouldn't have to worry about having now because there's still Kenyans, there's still leaders, they're still advancing the interest of Kenyans, to sit across from you, whether in a parliamentary committee or the like, and ask you difficult questions.
Yeah.
But if you have your fellow party member there over who you are chairing over this party member, and this person is supposed to ask you now a CS difficult questions, then there is where maybe now we start feeling like we're being taken for a ride, and why we just see it as preservation of power by the political
It is
elites.
100%, and I feel like perhaps they should have relinquished to other opposition party to lead the leader of minority in parliament, which is actually the office of the opposition in parliament, because it is difficult. I mean, I'm sure in law there's something like that you cannot. Is there, like in a court of law? That you cannot. It is hard for you to.
You're basically being judge, jury, and executioner.
That's what I was getting. I was like, yeah. You
need to have equality of arms, and equality of arms basically means that the person who, let's say, the complainant, otherwise known as the plaintiff, and you have the defendant. They need to have equality of arms in the sense that they have the same access to information, they have the same time to be heard, they have, they enjoy the same protections of the state. So in this sense, being the judge who's determining what is right for Kenyans, being the complainant of agitating for the issues of the people, and being again the defendant who is saying, no, this is why I adopted this policy, as opposed to, because right now why there's even reject finance bill, for instance, hashtag trending again, is because the new CS for Treasury has been at pains to explain what he means when he says that there are certain elements
of the finance bill that needs to be reintroduced. And when you listen to him, you can kind of see what he's trying to say, that it wasn't all 100% bad, and you still need to raise revenue. But there is where you're struggling to explain yourself as opposition while also being the CS Treasury. But those issues can come out better if you have
another leader from parliament asking you the right questions that would elicit the right answers, which can then be communicated to the public. But if you're in office struggling to put this bill together to raise revenue, and you're still trying to explain and hold yourself accountable,
it is such a mess. It's a circus that it is unfortunate that we are here again, because maybe for the Gen Zs, they may not remember that we've previously had a Nusu Mkate government, right? In 2008.
From 1964.
Actually, where?
From 1964. And that's why, earlier was saying that I empathize, because it's not easy to change a culture.
Yeah.
And at that time, what was at the center was, we did need political solutions. So you had KADU and KANU coming together. KADU was the minority ethnic communities, like we said on the episode where we're discussing a constitution and celebrating 14 years. And you had KANU, which had the bigger, majority ethnic communities. And KADU saw that they were going to become irrelevant, because the colonialists were basically giving power to KANU. And they agreed, okay, let's collapse our party and be swallowed by KANU. Yes, but as long as you take up some of our issues.
You're telling me, what I'm hearing is that our political culture has not changed. Because isn't that what Kenya Kwanza was trying to do, or is trying to do, get all the parties to collapse themselves into
Now, when we say that, Tukufu, right, is a student of Moi 001, who was one of the key leaders of KADU. Other than Ronald Ngala, you had Daniel Arap Moi. So, if you are index 001,
umesoma, umeandika mwa Kenya, and now when it is your time,
utafanya Kenya mwalimu amekufundisha.
Walai, hata you won't even notice. Utafikiria it's your ideas, but really.
Yeah, and now I remember, even now when you have this KANU coming into power, to solidify, it agreed to take up KADU's issues of Majimboism and the like. But as we were discussing in that other episode, as soon as Ghafla Benvu, they are in power, and start clawing back. I give you this. Acha nichukue hii kidogo. Acha hii tupunguze kidogo. Federalism is out of the window.
Yeah.
And you have an imperial presidency. So, and that's part of the anxiety right now. Yes, you have the immediate former chairman of ODM, 2 deputy party leaders of ODM, the minority leader of opposition, minority leader in parliament. And the anxiety is, yes, you've entered this cabinet saying that you're holding these issues dear, but that corrosion is not sudden. It happens slowly, progressively.
Chaka, let me ask you, do you foresee, like, leading up to 2027, we'll see a new formation or a new forced marriage, or arranged marriage between them?
To riding on the analogy of marriage, one of the things we tend to do in Kenya as part of our culture is that you have the traditional ceremonies.
First.
You come and have tea, and you have the traditional marriage before sasa watu waende kanisa. And I think what you're saying about 2027 is whether ODM na UDA wataenda kanisa. And for me, what I'm saying is the traditional marriage has happened and the marriage has been consummated.
Oh, come we stay.
Yes.
Come, now we're just waiting for the officiation. You didn't.
Because of 2027, si ukienda kanisa mnapatiwa marriage certificate. 2027 ni ABC inawapatia certificate.
You've had it first here at Politically Connected. UDA and ODM are in a come we stay marriage. But I'm sure this is, this is not the first time we're experiencing this.
No, it's not.
And
yeah.
it's important to understand where we've come from, so that whenever these scenarios come up, broad-based government, Nusu, Mkate, dialogue, whatever they call it, the political class will phrase it as. It's important to understand that it is the same thing, just being called differently. So you were telling us about how KANU swallowed up KADU as more of a political solution, another version of Come We Stay marriage. Yeah.
That one was a bit more official from the jump. And what we then see is you don't have too many political parties because they've been clamped down on, and then you have a one-party state. You have, you know, the KPUs and the like, and KAU was still in existence. But that political culture starts there. And you come to now the post Section 2A era of now when we enter multi-party politics. And
in 1991.
and there's this euphoria now during the elections thereafter, and you have a multiplicity of parties. In fact, I think just to give share some trivia, I recently learned that that political symbol,
like this,
was actually symbolizing multi-party because of two.
Two party. Really?
You know, I
because Nyawe used to be like
yes,
this.
one party state. So it's multi-party.
There you have it. Watu wa GHC.
So in 1992, you actually had a very ripe opportunity to have a change in government.
But
And what happens is the fragmentation of the opposition is very rife. Matiba is one of the leading candidates.
with Ford. Was it Ford Asili or Ford Kenya?
I confused the
The two,
Ford,
yeah.
And then there was also Ford People. And so then last minute, Obako comes in.
Kibaki.
Yeah. And if you look at the votes that Matiba had and Kibaki had, if they had joined forces,
It would have
Moi would have been
sent home.
at the time. But it showed the political deftness of President Moi, of divide and conquer. And you still see that happening today. And one may wonder, because remember Kibaki had also been a vice president for a long time.
8 years. Actually,
Yeah.
I think he's Moi's longest serving vice president.
Indeed.
Because Moi used to just hire, fire,
Yeah.
hire,
Between him and Saitoti, they served, a long time.
a long time.
And at that time you don't have 50% plus one, so it was simple majority.
Whoever
first
gets
past the
the
post.
majority.
Then 1997, opposition leaders are clued in, and they are now talking about, let's come together, let's join forces. That way, if we combine, we can really, take these guys home. So, see, the conversation is about acquiring power and removing someone from power. But they all agree that that's a good plan.
So they start having dialogues.
But they can't agree. They think now each of them should be the ones at the top of the ticket.
And that's where we saw my main girl, Charity Ngilu.
Yes.
She ran for president in 97.
Even Wangari
Maathai.
Yes,
By the way,
yes.
Wangari Maathai.
Yeah.
Why am I baptizing her new name?
So it then comes to the realization that, hey, Appa, now,
that was in 97.
97.
So we had NDP. What was Raila's party in 97? Because he left Ford, and then he formed a political party.
National Development Party.
NDP.
Yes.
And then still KANU was the ruling party.
Yes.
There was DP of Kibaki,
Yes.
and I think there was still Ford Kenya, Ford Asili.
Yeah, SDP of Ngilu.
Yeah.
You had, I don't know if LDP was in place at the time.
Is it LDP for Jaramogi?
No. LDP was Julia Ojambo, and I think Kalonzo was also there. So you really had multi-party politics.
Okay.
We might have mixed up some of them, but it's a very rich space. But people are realizing they need to come together. What they're struggling with is...
Who is going to be the one?
Yeah, no one wants to let go.
Who's going to be the flag bearer?
And so they finally come together in 2002. 2001, 2002, where you have NAK and then NAK Kenya. But, yes.
I have a fun fact.
Yes.
Remember KANU was?
Yes.
And then after that it was?
Yeah.
Guess what was NAK Kenya sign?
The rainbow. That's not true, really.
I swear, NAK Kenya sign is...
I just knew it was the rainbow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And I guess it informed... So the coalition.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now that you're asking me about today's Bible verse, you know, there's a proverb that talks... a verse in the book of Proverbs that talks about... a cord of three cannot easily be broken.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have this coalition moment, which we've talked about, I think, in our previous episodes.
Yeah.
But something interesting happens before 2002, which is still part of the political culture of politics of inclusion.
But even before we get to that moment, Raila joins KANU.
Yes.
The NDP is absorbed again into the ruling party KANU.
Yes.
But then uko he finds KANU kumbe kulikuwa na prince. A prince in waiting. He thought he'd be the flag bearer only to find a prince in waiting. Our fourth president of the Republic of Kenya, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, was the prince in waiting for KANU to be the flag bearer.
Yeah. And this time, Moi hadn't revealed it to country. So you have Raila joining, you know, cabinet as Minister for Energy. And I remember there was a cartoon that I think it was Akina Gado who used to draw of the Jogo swallowing a tractor, because that was a sign for... That was a sign for NDP. The Tinga Tinga. This is why Baba...
That's where he got the name Tinga.
Tinga. He's had very many names. So it's not Baba, not
Mzee wa Kitendawili,
Tinga, Arab Mibei, Hama, Jacob. So,
and now he's AC chair. I wonder what they call him. Baba ni Baba.
Atakuwa Baba
wa Africa.
Wa Africa. So it's interesting that you have now, and people hit him hard for joining
KANU.
And I remember that time, something very powerful he said was that he was entering into government with the man who had detained him. Yeah. So, and he was basically calling people out who are criticizing him that he should have the most to complain about.
Yes.
So it was really magnanimous of him, and really you have a Mandela moment there. You have a Mandela moment there.
I'm really just sitting here thinking to myself, whether I'd be a bigger person to put my own, you know, the family sacrifice that took when he was detained. And also he talks about why his eye is normally teary is because of how there was no light in the cell. There's just like a small
and a flickering light.
That he used to stare at, and then that's how.
And he wasn't there for a few days, few weeks. It was years.
It was years.
His mother passes away. He doesn't get to go and bury her. He doesn't even get to know about it in good time. He learns about it long after the fact. You don't see your children for so long.
And then he joins Moi's government. Yeah,
and he says that he should be the one who has the most to complain about.
Guys,
so
it's not sitting well with me.
So, and then he, and I think he was also made Secretary General of KANU. And then now come to just lead up to 2002, Moi tells everybody, mimi kwa maoni yangu huyu kijana na afanye na wengine.
I like a impersonation of Moi.
Kwa sababu dunia hii imeenda ukabila, vyama vyote vya kikabila
na nikaona kwamba yule ambaye anaweza kuendesha kupeleka wananchi kama vile mimi ningependelea wananchi kuongozwa ni Uhuru Kenyatta. Huyo kijana huyu. Na mimi
And then you see Uhuru standing there with a big blazer.
Uhuru. The blazer doesn't even fit you.
And then Jirongo is also standing, is not sure whether to sit or stand, you know. So
I'm sure Kina John Saitoti, all the people who are thinking now is my
they
time.
Are come
they
at
are
time.
upset.
That's why John Saitoti says they are come at time. When the interests of the nation are more important than an individual. Saitoti, Kalonzo, Raila, you have the likes of Katana Ngala.
Yes.
You have the likes of they're all leaving. Simeon Nyachai pia ameenda kujoin huku. Although Simeon Nyachai then runs alone because he felt he should have been the flag bearer of NARC instead of Kibaki.
What?
But really, now you have this moment where you have the doyens of politics all coming to do a collabo, you know, and the chorus, the punchline is given to us by Raila.
Kibaki Tosha.
Yeah, and everybody now sings that song and dances to that tune.
And yote yawezekana.
Yeah. And it was still at the time, because ask somebody whether they read the NARC manifesto.
Me, I told you what I remember about NARC.
Yeah.
Kibaki's picture, Uhuru's picture in black and white. Uhuru was untried, untested, basically saying that he's unqualified. And Kibaki in a bright yellow background, a nice, what was the tie blue? I remember the shirt was blue. The shirt was blue and the tie was yellow, and Kibaki's like, yeah, I'm the man for the job.
Yeah.
That is only what I recall. And I can imagine how many people, like, did you even need to read the manifesto?
No, my point being, I'm sure even if you ask Gen Xers, the most clued in at the time, intellectual progressive, they can't tell you why. I think they can't tell you because it was about getting Kanu and Moi out of power.
Yeah.
It was about power. And that's why, again, this culture is still sipping in now.
Yeah.
Why it's about unseating people and the like, but there's another conversation that is trying to come to the surface.
Yeah.
That
keeps being stifled. It keeps being suffocated. But I feel, I'd like to add to your point that it wasn't, I don't think the 202 moment was only just about Moi being into power. I feel the 10 years leading to 202, there were some progressive things that were trying to get some light of day. That's why we had the change, the IPPG of the Constitutional Review. Then we got the Constitutional Review Act, I think in 2001, which led now post Kibaki's first term to lead to the referendum. So I feel like there were some good things, and also the country was really just lethargic of the Moi rule. It seemed that his 24 years, but I have to give hats off to Mzee Moi.
Yeah.
He really just had the eye of knowing when it's time to say, sawa, hamnitaki, chukua huyu kijana. You know, as opposed to doing very many, I mean, maybe he tried in 92. There are stories of how they stuffed ballot boxes in 92. But he really just had the inkling of like, here ni kama napitwa na wakati. Right?
Yeah. But even him choosing Uhuru at the time was very undemocratic.
Very.
Yeah, and yes, it was there were other key issues, and those issues had to do with civil liberties and the things we now enjoy in our constitution, very rightly. And of course, Kibaki comes in and does a lot in terms of the economy.
Straight in. By the way, guys, Kibaki came in, and immediately he came in, he said, my friends, there will be free primary education.
Then he turns to his people and says, figure out how it's going to happen, but do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were having a conversation with some friends of ours, older friends of ours, who were youths during Kibaki's era. And they reminded us that, or rather they educated us, because I didn't know it then, that Kibaki's economic policy was internal projects, or rather development projects, would be funded by own source revenue.
Yes.
Meaning we never had stories of IMF, we never had stories of World Bank. They can come and do their own things, but the actual development plans and programs were going to be funded by Kenyans had on the tax that we used to pay the government.
Yeah.
And we see, and that's why we see how Kibaki's economy, even though it was marred with some scandals here and there of corruption and everything, is where we saw Kenya's economy really bursting. You know, the industriousness of Kenyans, you know, shops coming up, there was Nakumat, there were so many other homegrown Kenyan companies that just bustled.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, that directive for own source revenue is what you now see really, because now you have to look inside. It forced the country to now start thinking about how it's collecting revenue, because now you see revenue collection growing phenomenally, not just because of an expanding economy, but because now they are more serious about, you know, collecting that revenue.
Yeah.
And here's a fun fact. Do you know, as my daughters start asking, usually asks questions by saying, do you know the minister or leader who oversaw and was responsible for the setting up of the Kenya Revenue Authority?
Shock me.
Your Prime Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi.
Lakini this DVD has been in government for how long?
He's been in cabinet since he was in his 20s.
What, he was part of the Nini of KRA?
He was Minister for Finance.
Oh, then.
Yeah, and he oversaw the setting up of KRA, because at the time you didn't have a KRA. I think it was still municipal authorities that were collecting
tax.
Or it was a department in the Ministry of Finance. But he oversees the setting up of KRA.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting.
You know, sometimes when you hold on to... No. I don't want to spoil for you guys for the next episode. Watch the next episode. Taskia hiyo. Yeah, yes. But I'm just saying that unlike all the other instances we've had, Nusu Mkates or dialogues or broad-based governments, the one that was really, it may have not been in the interest of the people, but it really impacted the people, seems to be the Kibaki Tosha moment that led to the Rainbow coalition that brought in the Kibaki government, because it seems that like we said in episode 1, Kenya was the most optimistic country then, and we saw things, and I mean, we're still reaping from the benefits of the Kibaki regime, but he didn't have an easy time.
It wasn't all, sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
Because in 2005, you have a key moment. And one of the promises that Kibaki had made, they were ambitious. He had promised a new constitution within 100 days. Yeah, coming into office.
I don't know if you guys can tell, I'm such a Kibaki fan.
But it was coming around 3 years later, because it wasn't an easy conversation.
I can imagine.
Because you're taking power away from the center. And the thing about this animal we call power, it's not just about who's at the top. This government animal, this Leviathan, it's a huge vessel that is difficult to turn, with many systems that are entrenched. So
like the Titanic ship.
Clawing power away from it is not easy, and that's what happens in 2005, where you have a draft, but people feel it's not speaking to some of the key issues. And it's retaining power at the center.
Tuseme people ama a section of Kibaki's government decided. You know, it's quite interesting, like how the people who led the No Revolution, the No, is it a revolution? Can I call it a revolution? Because they did
The
revolt movements.
Yeah.
Were in Kibaki's government. There were executives in Kibaki's government. There were ministers, assistant ministers, perhaps even there were MPs under the NAC coalition. And they disagree with their principle. They're like
subordination.
Well, like, why unataka tuseme yes to the work of draft as we are saying no.
And I empathize again with Kibaki because yes, the constitution has some progress, but remember again, this was one of the longest serving vice presidents, and in fact, you know, interestingly, I think I could be wrong, but I think it was Kibaki who said that Kanu reigned for 100 years. So he was a Kanu Damu guy.
Where are we right now? Are we like in year 99? Because
Bado, we still have half a decade to go.
What?
Yeah. So, but 2005, yes, Akina Raila go against that, and Kivuitu had given us banana and an orange. And you know, by the way, that was an exercise in public participation and civic education.
Yeah.
So that it's easy for people to identify the orange means this and this banana means this.
Yeah, I remember how contentious it was because even us who were in school then, like if your house was orange, like your sports house is orange, then you're automatically the no camp. If your house is yellow because it was a sign for the banana, then you're automatically yes camp. And I remember having such dialogues and
So why does it surprise us when we see young people out on the streets?
It shouldn't be surprising.
Yeah, it shouldn't be surprising.
Absolutely. But you see, I think they were so used to young people taking a back seat and being more focused on other things like entertainment and stuff. But they didn't realize that young people are kind of like sponges. Unasikia tu. You know, it's like a child who's learning to talk. You know, you tell them, say purple, and they won't say it until the moment where you have even stopped paying attention. And then that's when they come and say purple. And that's exactly what the Gen Z movement did. It's like the political class thought that they are not listening, they are not paying attention, so let's just do our own things. Only for them to come and say, tumekuwa tukikuwaona na tunasema hapana, reject, dissolve, mwende home, recall.
Yeah, what you're saying and what you're doing, kuna panli ya ziambatani. Yeah, so then you have this very big political moment where the birth of ODM happens because of Kivuitu giving us orange.
Chama cha ODM.
And what people might not know is that there were two ODMs going into 2007 elections.
Really?
Yes.
ODM?
There was ODM Kenya and there was ODM. One was an orange and another one was an orange and a quarter or an orange and a half.
What?
Yes.
Who was orange
because,
and a half? Again, a fight for power, I'm sure. They were not sure who's going to be the flag bearer.
Because our leader of Wiper, actually, Wiper Party of Kenya is still really ODM Kenya, which changed its name to Wiper. It's the same party that rebranded.
Oh, to Wiper.
Yes. Damn. And it was the late Mutula Kilonzo Senior who coined Wiper. So you have, you know, this orange movement being born. Another fun fact is, because at this time, right after 2005, Orange is not yet a party.
Yeah,
still
it's just a movement.
So if you look through video archives from that time, you might see on the podiums with a lot of orange and orange branded shirts.
Yeah.
And, you will see somebody at the forefront there who's wearing an orange shirt, an orange coffee, cutting a big orange cake and eating it. Uhuru Kenyatta.
I was about to say your favorite politician. He was a leader of
official opposition.
Opposition there.
Yeah, he was an official leader. So he also rejected that.
No.
Yeah.
And similarly to what we had now, although it wasn't about a referendum, Kibaki had to dissolve his parliament, his cabinet.
Yes.
Because of the split, because you had ministers who were in the no camp, and the no camp won the referendum, and now how do you call back people who have gone out and publicly defied the direction you're going? How do you tame them? So he decided, you know what, let us just dissolve parliament. I mean, why do I keep on confusing the two? Dissolve cabinet.
Because Moi used to dissolve parliament, or he did quite a number of times.
Really?
He had the power to.
Yeah, but interesting that now that action by Kibaki really now consolidated what we saw in 2007 and then 2008, which brought upon the National Accord. So maybe as we get to wrap up, tell us more about the...
What's interesting, maybe I can still pick up with Uhuru Kenyatta, is at this time now he's moved away from the Orange movement and he's supporting, still as KANU, the Party of National Unity, supporting Kibaki in 07. But the bigger point is that election happens, it's contested. It's a dark cloud over the history of our country because of how close we came to the brink. And the solution was a political solution. And now I think arguably for the first time, you have the entrenchment of and the formalization of political solutions, because the National Accord was actually an instrument of Parliament.
It was. Was it enshrined in the Constitution? Was it adopted into the Constitution, the then Constitution?
Elements of it came to be part of the transitional clauses of the 2010 Constitution. Yes.
So that
brings about a situation where this political settlement has been formalized, in this government of national unity. And the next time we see anything close to that, though it wasn't formal, is the handshake.
Outside Harambee House.
Yeah, because it also followed months of unrest and protest.
I'm starting to realize something, Chaka, and maybe it's something we can unpack. That the politicians we have today have a similar DNA, right? We may have outliers who don't have the same DNA that play in the political space. But really, some of the things we are talking, like we've started from 1964, some of the issues and the culture we are talking about has formed a certain political DNA that majority of our politicians are bathed into, right? And that is the actual core of our issues, that even though you're opposition, I mean, look at it now. For me, I'm struggling. I really am struggling as someone who supported Azimio. And by Azimio, I mean all the parties in Azimio. To see Opiyo Wandayi and Ali Hassan Joho, to see Oparanya and all these people who we campaigned and went around the country, now singing the same tune as the Kenya Kwanza. I'm really struggling. And I'm now starting to realize that it's just me struggling. Them, they're okay. Because what they share a certain political DNA. That it is easy to just switch. Leo nimevaa white, kesho nitavaa yellow.
And that's part of why I was saying I empathize as we were starting the episode, because there's a culture problem. And that's why urgently we need fresh blood in our politics that doesn't carry that DNA.
Yeah, and we need to stop having forced and arranged marriages, because what we've seen here is that 2002 was more of an arranged marriage. It was not forced. Then we have 2007, which was a forced marriage, because we had to fly Kofi Annan here to force us to work together. To force us to... And then we have another arranged marriage in 2018 where we see the handshake. And then now, here we are 2024.
We have Broadway's government.
That was kind of forced. I'm saying forced because it is the Gen Zs that gave them the opportunity and had to force the current Mutukufu, Hey, my tongue is heavy. Sijui ni
Fungua roho,
lies. But yeah, that had to force him to look for a political solution. So, but then also the people he was looking for were all too ready. They were too happy to embrace him. So we're seeing places where these forced and arranged political marriages are just marriages that preserve a certain class and not really focus, because yani all these issues over the years ziko the same, by the way, ziko the same, the culture is the same, and where the political class beats us to is technicalities and how they phrase the word. Unajua sasa, kumbuka during the campaign our Mutukufu said yeye si mtu wa nusu mkate. Alisema hivyo. But because
they will not believe.
They will not believe. But here we are. And different the same version, a nusu mkate government, but really now is being called a broad-based. I was about to say broadways. A broad-based government.
There's a book called The End of Power, and it was written by somebody who was a cabinet minister in I think it was Brazil or one of those Latin American countries. And the central thesis of this book, The End of Power, is that there is this illusion of how much power office holders actually have. And from the outside, we see like they have so much power. But when you sit in that position, you actually realize why Uhuru was like, mnataka nifanye nini? Because in many respects, your hands are actually tied. So our president may have been completely against Nusu Mkate, power sharing.
Yeah.
But the dynamics around the operations of state and country go beyond that one office, such that
you need everyone.
We see the choice that he made, but we may not be fully privy to the options that he had. Yeah.
I hope one day I'll be able to talk about Mutukufu like that, so positively.
I would like to think it's a pragmatic assessment, because I think what I'm playing at is he didn't have much of a choice.
He definitely didn't have much of a choice because, like we said, the 25th protest really basically dissolved parliament. The entire government had lost legitimacy. Like people were now actually going, as opposed to only parliament, people were now going after different institutions that form the government, the different arms. So, I mean, he obviously for survival, he didn't have a choice. But for country, I believe he had a choice. But that's something we can unpack in another episode. Yeah, so I think we've come to the end. And before we wrap up, what is your parting shot on forced and arranged marriages?
I think my parting shot is this. Earlier we were saying that sometimes there's a risk in seeing things in absolute terms. And the political solution is not entirely bad, because political stability is important for the thriving of an economy.
Yeah.
And whenever Baba has been in government, there has been substantial progress for country. So my hope, because we love country, we don't want to be pessimistic. My hope is that with the inclusion of his lieutenants into cabinet, we will see progress. I hope they can also be honest with us and relinquish this this story they are holding on to, that they can be in cabinet and opposition. Actually.
Yeah.
And even as that happens, I hope that they can quickly come back to the issues that were at the center of our politics in the first half of the year. Because if they don't, zitawakujia tu.
October. October ni next month. Yeah, I agree with you there that it is my sincere hope that even if the principles of the opposition party are now in executive and they say in their own individual capacity, is that we don't further claw back the checks and balances that make the democracy. Because we have such a brilliant constitution, it would be so heartbreaking that just because the political solution for country stability, that now we are further entrenching political preservation. Because you know what we've seen is that when ni kama kuna Mwakenya inasomwa, so now what will people learn? I keep thinking that in the next election, if there's a dispute or anything, what happens now? Now this other person now also reads from this playbook, and we keep going back into this cycle of political solutions for serious issues that are never looked up, and we end up having no country.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Or country in name only.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So a lot to reflect on.
Kwa hayo mengi na machache.
Yeah. We'll see you next time on Politically Connected. Thank you for joining us on today's conversations on forced and arranged marriages in our political history and our current context. Please subscribe so that you don't miss a beat whenever an episode drops.
Stay connected.
Yes, stay connected. Not just to us, but to the politics of the day. And if you have any comments or any questions, please feel free to drop it on our comment section on the YouTube. We're also on social media. We're on X, we are on Twitter, we are on Instagram as Politically connected with a K, and Politically with a K, because politics ni kali.
I like that. And in the comments, we welcome, you may have more information or insights about current affairs or the history. We're also learning, so share with us, give us your opinion, your perspective. If you have different facts,
if you disagree,
karibuni.
Yeah, so see you next time. The episode drops weekly on every Sunday evening, so we'll see you next time.